Good afternoon, and welcome to the 8th installment of a Sunday Vespers hymn sing, brought to you by Second Presbyterian Church in Portsmouth, Ohio. I'm Dr. Stanley Workman, Director of Music at Second Presbyterian, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Justin Wiget, Director of Music at All Saints Episcopal Church. This afternoon, falling in line with the celebrations of this Independence Day weekend, we are bringing you a program that celebrates our rich American musical heritage. We will start off with the famous God of Our Fathers. The hymn's origins can be traced back to 1876, when the United States was celebrating the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Daniel C. Roberts, an American Episcopal priest, wrote the text for the hymn to be used during a small patriotic celebration in Vermont. The lyrics ask God to continue to guide and protect us as he has done in the past. When the lyrics were written, a different hymn tune was used, the famous Russian hymn, which can be heard in the 1812 overture. The hymn gained great popularity when American George W. Warren, organist of New York City's St. Thomas Church for 30 years, wrote his own music for it in 1892. The new music was unmistakable in its ability to invoke feelings of patriotism, especially with its exciting trumpet fanfares. Our next hymn is Nearer, My God, to Thee, certainly one of the most touching hymns ever written and truly a favorite of mine. The text was written by Sarah Flower, who was born in 1805 in Essex, England. Sarah grew up in a home surrounded by poetry and songwriting, and later became well praised as an actress for her Shakespearean roles. Retiring from the stage due to poor health, she turned to writing hymns to accompany her pastor's sermons, one of them being Near My God to Thee. It was written to follow a sermon on Genesis 28, known as the story of Jacob's ladder or Jacob's dream. It was originally paired with a tune by Sarah's sister, Eliza, but gained worldwide popularity when wed with a tune by American Lowell Mason. Lowell Mason, 1792 to 1872, was a leading figure in American church music and is largely credited with introducing music into American public schools, thus earning him the honor of being considered the first important U.S. music educator. He was also a composer of over 1,600 hymn tunes, many of which are often sung today. His best-known work includes his arrangement of Joy to the World and the tune for Nearer My God to Thee. The history of hymns in the United States is certainly indebted in part to the African American spiritual, the song born out of the misery, the faith, and the hope of African American slaves during their captivity in the 19th century. Like many songs of this type, there exists many variations, while the version you will hear today is the most well-known and appears in many modern hymnals. Our next hymn is Come, Ye Disconsolate. The author of this hymn, Thomas Moore, 1779 to 1852, was best known as an Irish poet and balladeer. He wrote a number of popular songs, and many consider him to be Ireland's national bard, Ireland's answer to Scotland's Robert Burns. Moore surprised everyone when in 1824 he published the collection of sacred texts, which included Come, Ye Disconsolate. However, the text was rescued from oblivion by American Thomas Hastings, composer of Rock of Ages, who revised the text to its current form, achieving worldwide popularity. This hymn invites the disconsolate, those who are unhappy, to bring their miseries to God's mercy seat, and assures them that earth has no sorrows that heaven cannot heal. A touching story involving this hymn occurred at one of the most solemn moments in the history of our country, and involves this account by one of the generals at Gettysburg. He recounts, "As the sun went down, neither side held the field, and the now trampled wheat, covered in blood and dead and dying men, became a type of no man's land, separating the Union and Confederate lines. In the midst of that hellish scene, I was amazed to hear one of the men between the lines begin to sing, 'Come, ye disconsolate, where ye languish. Come to the mercy seat, fervently kneel.' There were thousands of desperately wounded men lying on the ground within easy hearing of the singer, and as his voice rang out like a flute, not only the wounded, but also 5,000 or 10,000, and maybe more of the men of both armies could hear and distinguish the words. One can only imagine the healing balm that hymn provided in that moment."
Come to the
The next three hymns were written and composed by one of the most famous hymn writers of the 19th century, Robert Lowry, 1826 to 1899. Born in Philadelphia, Lowry, in addition to being a hymn writer, was a Baptist minister and held pastorates throughout Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. Even though he protested that preaching was his main vocation, he is best remembered today as a hymn writer, ranking as one of the originators of a gospel music tradition that has lasted into this modern era. I Need Thee Every Hour was written by Annie Sherwood Hawkes, 1835 to 1918, a poet and a member of the Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York, where Dr. Robert Lowry was her pastor. Lowry encouraged the gift he saw in her poetry. Hawkes writes, "One day, as a young wife and mother of 37 years, I was busy with my regular household tasks during a bright June morning in 1872. Suddenly, I became so filled with a sense of nearness to the Master that, wondering how one could live without him, either in joy or pain, these words were ushered into my mind. The thought at once taking full possession of me, I need thee every hour." Lowry added a refrain as he wrote the music for the hymn. Nothing But the Blood of Jesus has all the earmarks of a classic gospel song. It focuses on a single theme and hammers it home. Lowry adopts a call-response pattern in the stanzas that immediately engage the singer, and the language is direct and obvious. The theme of cleansing from sin is prominent in gospel song literature. When first published, Hebrews 9:22 originally appeared above the hymn. The passage reads, "Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin." but the blood of Jesus. This is all my hope and peace, nothing but the blood of Jesus. This is all my righteousness, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Shall We Gather at the River is probably Lowry's most famous hymn, along with Low in the Grave He Lay. It was written in Brooklyn on an oppressively hot afternoon in 1864, and barely being able to move from physical exhaustion, he began to meditate on Revelation 22. Visions of the future passed before him with startling vividness. The imagery of the apocalypse took the form of a tableau. Brightest of all were the throne, the heavenly river, and the gathering of the saints. While he was thus breathing heavily in the sultry atmosphere of that July day, his soul seemed to take new life from its celestial outlook. When the song had formulated itself, the author sprang up, sat down at his organ, played the tune through, and sang the first stanza and the chorus. Then he wrote it out. One of our most beloved national songs, America the Beautiful, can rightly be called a hymn as well. In an article published in 1918, the poet Catherine Bates provides details of the hymn's composition. Bates began composing this hymn in Colorado Springs, Colorado, while traveling west in 1893 with a group of teachers from New England. After a long ride to the summit by horse and finally mule-drawn wagon, a brief view of Pikes Peak provided a panoramic spectacle that was the inspiration for Purple Mountain Majesties. A visit to a lagoon at Chicago's Columbian Ward Exposition in celebration of the 400th anniversary of the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus inspired the image of alabaster cities in the final stanza. The white neoclassical designed exhibition building at the exposition became known popularly as the White City. A vision of Kansas wheat fields observed by a train on July 16th stimulated the memorable phrase, "amber waves of grain." The search for a tune for this text was not easy. Bates noted that more than 60 tunes had been written for her text. In 1926, the National Federation of Music Clubs held a contest for a tune, but none of the approximately 600 entries were deemed suitable. Today, America the Beautiful is exclusively sung to Samuel Ward's hymn tune, Materna. Ward, 1847 to 1903, was a New Jersey-born musician who served as organist at Grace Episcopal Church in Newark, beginning in 1880. It appears that Ward neither met Bates nor heard the hymn in its completed form with his tune before his death in 1903. The pairing of his tune in 1912 with Bates' text eventually placed him in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. There have been many movements over the years to adopt the hymn as the national anthem.
Thanks again for joining us for this Vespers hymn sing service. We're glad you tuned in. Again, if you have a request that you would like to hear, we'll be back again next Sunday at 4 p.m. with another round of hymns. So if you have a request, give us a call at Second Pres, 740-353-4159. That's 740-353-4159. 459. Be well and be blessed.